That's a good question. That's a good question. I don't know the answer.
I think I might be unavoidably very busy now and all this busy.
Yeah, I guess it's just like. It's a nice place. But mine is very good. Hey, that's what it says. Big sound is
If I can
see the five lines. You see that? You should worry. That's also yeah, there too.
All right, everyone. Let's settle down. Settle down. Look, I know we have no power of you anymore. Let's settle down. Hi, everyone. It's our last of this season. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Yuji. I said it almost a little bit more right, but they're all laughing at me, so I didn't. He's an assistant professor with us. He's also affiliated with the Informatics Institute and the Transportation Institute, and he's the head of the GeoNavi group, and conducts research on urban transportation, human mobility, and accessibility. He's also a recipient of the Plough Junior Faculty Enhancement Award in Oak Ridge, which is really cool. And today he's going to talk to us about commuting too much.
Yeah, too much. Okay, so thank you, Sadie, for the introduction. I think it's really been a while since I gave a talk to the department. Last time I gave a talk was in downtown, like 2019. So yeah, really been a while. It's really exciting to be here. So yeah, the keywords of my research are keywords. All right, now working. Yeah. All right, our keywords. So transportation, human mobility, and accessibility. Specifically, I work on 3 different themes. The first one is to understand the movement patterns of people's mobility within cities. For example, commuting behavior, commuting trips, healthcare seeking trips. The second aspect is to measure spatial accessibility of neighborhoods to opportunities like jobs, to services like healthcare, to infrastructure like road networks, and how their accessibility can be affected by natural hazards like earthquakes. The third aspect is to visualize, analyze, optimize network flow patterns, which is a little bit similar to or relevant to the talk today. So I have a few maps showing some of the works. This one, if you've been to the AAG session, I did like virtually, because at the last moment I couldn't go due to family reasons. So this map shows the commuting flow patterns of baby boomers in Florida. So how seniors are commuting on a daily basis. I also have a few maps showing millennials, Generation Xers, so that can help understand the differences in labor market geographies among generational cohorts. And this map, if you remember, that's showing the hospital inpatient discharge flows, how patients are using hospital care. So it can help identify areas of overutilization or underutilization of hospital care. So these maps and the graph show human movement patterns in Charlotte County, Lee County, so Cape Coral, Fort Myers, during so September 27th, September 28th. That's when Hurricane Ian hit the area. As you can tell, the flow, the movement flow, density, and connectivity patterns has fallen, declined pretty significantly. Right, so here shows the temporal patterns of total number of trips being made and average travel distance of the residents from those two counties. It's a pretty interesting result. All right, that's some examples of what I and my groups do. And yeah, so the title of my talk today is Modeling and Analysis of Excess Commuting with Trip Chains. It's a little bit, I would say that it's a very narrow subfield in transportation geography and urban economics. There are some engineers and urban planners who study this topic as well. The reason why I pick this topic today is because I guess many of you have never heard the term excess commuting, or commuting, of course, but excess commuting. I would guess many of you have never heard that before. The second reason, like I said, very narrow topic, narrow field, is very understudied topic in transportation geography, urban economics. So I thought it's a good opportunity for me to bring up this to you guys, hoping to get more interested effort to promote, to further develop this kind of stuff. All right, I kind of set a goal for myself today, which is to make sure every of you, if you pay attention, of course, every of you can understand what excess commuting is and the process to measure it, right? Not saying that you will be an expert in this topic, but at least you understand what it is. So I'm going to spend quite some time talking about the development of this concept, what it means, and some assumptions. And we'll have a few slides on the model formulation and the result discussion. So it'll be quite different from AAG talk, like in the transportation geography session, where you can skip most of the intro part, right? All right. Now back to this map. So this beautiful map shows the commuting flows between census tracts, right, in the lower 48 states of the U.S. We can easily tell the spatial boundaries or spatial extent of metropolitan areas, right? Los Angeles, San Francisco, Twin Cities, Dallas, for example, Florida, we can see Tampa, Orlando, Miami, Jacksonville, and we can see Gainesville and Ocala, right? Very tightly connected. That means there are many people who live in Gainesville or work in Ocala or vice versa, right? This is actually exactly how Census Bureau defines the boundaries of metropolitan statistical areas. So using commuting flow data as a proxy for the length of economic connection between places. All right, so let me do a quick survey. How long do you typically commute? One way. All right, how long do you typically commute? One way. Do you spend less than 10 minutes commuting? One way? Raise your hand.
Do we take into account child drop off?
Yes, that's a good point. All right. So it's less than 10 minutes, all right, a couple. 10 to 20 minutes. Okay, 20 to 30 minutes. On average, all right, not talking about like congestion or accidents, on average. All right, more than 30 minutes. Okay, all right. I would say that this is not a very good sample. Yeah, so I think the average for Gainesville, the average commuting time for Gainesville, almost considered is 23 minutes. All right, so most of you like fall within 10 to 20 minutes. All right, but that's a good thing. But the national average is 27.6 minutes, right, one way. In 2019, according to the most recent U.S. Census Bureau data. But it can vary a lot depending on where you live, right? It's a pretty, simple geographic problem. So next question is, based on this map, can you guys tell me which state you think has the longest average commuting time and which state has the shortest average commuting time? You can tell that from the map, guess, or based on your personal experience. Give me the name of two states.
New Jersey.
New Jersey?
Texas.
We are a geography department. Hey, work hard.
Congestion or just administrative time?
Time, yeah. Average.
California.
All right, so Sadie got it. New York. New York has the longest average commuting time. All right, New York. I think that's pretty expected, right? Which state has the shortest? Rhode Island. Too far. No, absolutely not. Oh, but it's getting close. It's getting very close. What? Very close. All right. Yes. South Dakota. All right. South Dakota. So, given the amount of efforts you guys spend in interpreting the map, you know what I would do for geography? I would log on to one.ufl, find the transforming geography for the fall, and sign up. All right. That will help you with my map interpretation, of course. So, all right. So South Dakota here has the shortest average commuting time in the nation. That's 16.6 minutes. New York State has 33.4 minutes on average. It's quite different. The different color represent different modes. The yellow color represents commuting time by automobiles. The gray bars represent commuting time by public transit. And these red lines represent the average, right, between two nodes. As you can see, very significant differences. So Florida is right here, 27.4 minutes. Like I said, Gainesville is at 23.4 minutes, according to the census data. All right, if you look at this figure, this graph, you can tell that the national average commuting time has been increasing over the last few decades, from 21.7 minutes in 1980 to 27.6 minutes in 2019, the most recent data. All right, and this diagram shows the commuting mode distribution. Right, altogether, driving along, carpooling are the modes used by most commuters. Right, that's about 86%. It's a pretty significant amount of trips by car. So given these trends, increasing commuting time and most of the trips by automobiles, so commuting can have very serious negative impacts to individuals, to communities, to environment. For example, if you don't know what these numbers mean, these are just, for me to remember things. 54 hours. So Americans spend an average of 54 hours per year sitting in traffic on their way to or from work, right? 54 hours per year on average. So for people who have longer commutes, especially for those who have more than 30 minutes commute, pay attention. For people who have more than 30 minutes on their commute every day, so on average, people are more likely, 33% more likely to be depressed. 46% more likely to sleep less than 7 hours a day. And 21% more likely, you don't want to raise your hand again, Jane. 21% more likely to be obese compared to
With COVID.
compared to people who spend less than 30 minutes, commuting per day, right, one way. So all of these, might contribute to poor health conditions. In addition to that, commuting can have also other negative impacts. For example, air pollution, greenhouse gas emissions. This figure shows traffic on major highways in Los Angeles, right? We can find that traffic over the first few days in March 2020, initial lockdown in Los Angeles, the traffic has fallen dramatically, right, compared to 2019 or other times. So the famous rush hour congestion has virtually disappeared. With the decline in traffic, pollution has dropped as well. So data from European Space Agency's satellite showed that atmospheric levels of nitrogen dioxide in the first 2 weeks of March 2020, right, were considerably lower compared to the same time period, March 2019, right? So it's a very significant difference in the amount of air pollution. So that means we need to think about ways to reduce the overall length of commuting and the amount of commuting trips, right, given the benefits. But how do we do that? A very popular policy is the so-called jobs housing balance. So to improve the so-called jobs housing balance, right? Think of ways to improve that. So this policy solution is to promote less travel, shorter trips by developing appropriate mixes of land use so that workers on average live close to where they, workers live close to their jobs on average. I'm not saying everybody just live next to their job, but on average in the city. So that, reducing the length and amount of commuting trips. For example, if in a city, the resident workers greatly outnumber jobs, that means there will be more people leaving the city to get jobs. So more commuting trips, more traffic, and worse environment impacts. Traditionally, this job housing balance has been measured as a simple ratio of jobs to workers, so the number of jobs to the number of workers, right? If it's a higher rate, it means more jobs within the city. And many empirical studies have found a significant relationship between this ratio and average commuting time or distance. For example, this is one of my papers looking at the Baton Rouge metropolitan area. So we can find a negative relationship between the ratio and the mean commute. This is distance, miles, this is time, minutes. But there are some problems with establishing a workable solution of job housing balance. Like I said, typically people use a ratio. But that definition involves making a kind of assumption or a less appropriate method. It is to draw a commuting threshold or range around each job site. All right, for example, 12 minutes, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 30 minutes. But how do we determine that range? Apparently, the larger the commuting range, all right, it will change this ratio a lot. So we need some other ways. This is kind of similar to the MAUP effect in geography, right? So we need some other ways to quantify this job housing balance so that decision makers can take that value and evaluate whether the policy or the city layout design is good or not. And excess commuting. Remember the title, excess commuting provides a feasible solution. But before I get into that, let's look at this question. From your personal experience, what is the percentage of commute wasted?
100%.
Compared to,
Wasted.
exactly, compared to what? 100%. You mean you don't need to come here at all?
You don't need me. I hate Zoom.
I mean, it's wasted like when you're not actually spending that time.
It can be that. So that's a good point. There are, it depends on how you define wasted commute, right? One example is traffic congestion. It's taking you longer than necessary to get to your job, right? So for example, like I said, on average, Americans spend 54 hours per year to sit in traffic. And Washington, D.C. is the winner, 82 hours per year are sitting in traffic during their commute. There's some other factors that can lead to longer commutes than necessary. The second factor is your routing preference. Think about it. How many of you always stick to the shortest path? Always stick to the quickest route. Say again?
I go the same route every day.
Is it the shortest?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So you should get a medal or something.
We'll work on that.
According to a few papers like this one, most people did not choose the shortest path. So exactly, right, based on what I just asked. So that means from the routing preference perspective, many of us are traveling longer than necessary, right? That means we're contributing more to the air pollution, right? So another factor contributing to more commute than necessary is the supply or the coverage of public transportation, right? Especially in areas with very limited coverage, right? A lack of reliable, efficient, accessible public transportation options can lead to workers making multiple transfers to get to where they work instead of taking a direct bus. There can be a long list. For example, like flexible working hours. You can spend both time sitting in traffic working, so improve your productivity. But there's one factor I want to highlight here, which is kind of related to excessive commute. It is the spatial imbalance between housing and jobs in a city. In other words, it means the mixing of jobs and housing in the city is not compatible, right? So that longer distances between homes and jobs overall in the city. It can be different things. For example, poor design of a city, or some inefficient, ineffective policies, right? That's actually a geographic problem, right? The spatial separation between the overall homes and jobs in the city. All right, so what is excess commuting? So excess commuting, this concept was first raised in 1982, right? Before I was born, 1982. It was called.
I think that was unnecessary. For some of us.
It was called wasteful commuting, right? originally it was called wasteful commuting. It was proposed by urban economics, right? So urban economics literature. So I want to say that urban economics because many economists usually make very strong assumptions to simplify complex systems, right? To understand the processes, the problems of that system. So you're going to later find out there are some strong assumptions built in when solving the excessive commuting problem, right? So originally wasteful commuting, and then later researchers suggest a more neutral term, excessive commuting. It is the difference between the actual commuting of a city or a region and the theoretical minimum commute. So pay attention to this. It's a theoretical minimum commute, right? So this is excessive commuting. This is actual or observed. This is minimum commuting. If we got a 60, that means on average, 60% of the city's actual commute is over its theoretical minimum value. This means a pretty inefficient commuting system in the city, right? To get the actual commute, it's pretty straightforward. As long as you know how to measure distance in GIS, or regardless of QGIS, ArcGIS, whatever platform or program you use. So you just grab data, for example, from US Census Bureau or any other mobility data set, and then calculate distance, the weighted average, you will get actual commute of the city. But what about minimum commute? So minimum commute of the city is the lowest possible level of commuting, supported by the existing spatial arrangements of housing and jobs in the city. I want to highlight the word existing spatial arrangement. That means we don't make modifications to the city at all. So without adding new jobs, without adding new housing units, without removing jobs, without tearing down communities, without making changes to the transportation infrastructure, keeping everything as is. Every given urban form has a theoretical minimum commute, right? So the job is to find that value. How to do that, right? There's assumption. How to do that? It can be solved by an optimization process of repairing the flows from homes to jobs until the city can have an ordered commuting system where everyone kind of move close to their jobs. All right. So it used to be kind of random and the longer commutes, but then it's kind of ordered system. Right. So think of a way that you move to a job close, you relocate so that you get to live close to your work, right, your job. All right, so this kind of behavior actually is consistent with some empirical research. For example, the rational locator hypothesis. All right, meaning commuters are rational locators. So we want to maintain kind of comfortable commuting time. We don't want to go over that commuting time. If for any instance, we commute longer than our threshold, we're going to relocate, or we're going to change the job, or we're going to find a new home. Okay. This process works as if a city planner has a bird's eye view of the city, all right, and then monitor the traffic, the flow patterns, and then identify areas of very long commuting flows and break those down, move folks around, all right, repair the links so that on average, employers are local employers, right? Employees, sorry. Local employees who work locally. So that means like planners, I'm not sure if we have planners today. So planners better to learn remote sensing. All right, so, but again, this is kind of theoretical minimum commute, all right? Why is theoretical? Because it is hard to achieve, but theoretically, it is doable. It requires a lot of work. For example, teaming up city planners with local government agencies community organizations, and even transportation providers to come up with plans, policies, subsidies to encourage behavioral change towards more sustainable travel. Right? So theoretically, this is doable. To help you better understand the process, I make a toy example here. This Manhattan Island, New York City. There are about 400 hotels, all right, in the island. 400 hotels about. Let's assume at this moment, every hotel has a guest who is being checked out right now, who needs to get to the airport. And the front desk is, making reservations of the taxis available scattered around the city, right, island, so that a taxi will come by and pick up the guest and get them to the airport, right? So each line has two ends. The red ends represent the location of the taxis, and the blue ends represent the location of hotels. Okay, so the job is to find the best pairing of taxi location and hotel location so that the total transportation cost is minimum. All right, from a taxi company's perspective, minimize travel costs. So this is one non-optimal solution. The total distance of those 400 taxis is about 1,100 miles. If you look at the optimal result, that's like this. Very huge difference, about 5 times, right? The minimum travel distance, total travel distance is 200 miles, about 200 miles. Okay. I think I just mentioned that job housing balance usually use ratio of jobs to workers, and if it involves making assumption or, derive a commuting range. Right? And I said, excess commuting provides a solution. If you think it through, minimum commute is actually a measure of job housing balance. A smaller value means, on average, jobs are close to housing in the city. Right? Like, for example, 3 miles or 5 minutes. Right? That means a more balanced relationship. Right? If it's like 15 miles, right? 30 miles compared to 5 miles, it means unbalanced or less balanced relationship. So now, using the minimum commute, we are able to convert or transform the measure of job housing balance from a ratio involving making some arbitrary assumptions, right, to a distance-based measure, which is easy to interpret and does not involve finding any arbitrary choices of commuting range, right? So that's why, since then, minimum commute has been used a lot to examine the city layout efficiency, transportation planning, policies to examine the city's commuting system and provide policy implications. All right. So the process of finding the optimal pairing, right, between homes and jobs or taxis and the hotels is the so-called linear programming problem. It's a very traditional classic problem in optimization research. So in transportation, it has a different name. It's called transportation problem because it's usually used to find the minimum transportation cost, total transportation cost of a particular commodity or product being shipped from a set of supply nodes to a set of destination locations. All right. So supply nodes here can represent factories, manufacturing facilities. Demand nodes or destination nodes represent stores or warehouses. Okay. And there are some constraints. Each supply node, we have a supply capacity. It's not unlimited capacity, right? So that means we know the maximum number of products that can be shipped from it. And each demand node has a demand size, which is the minimum number of products that need to be shipped to that store. Okay? And there is cost on each route or each link, which is proportional to the distance and also the amount of the number of products being shipped. So this can be easily transformed into a matrix. So rows is source, columns is destination or demand, right? So here are the supply capacity. These column total are the demand size, right? So the matrix element here are the cost between O and B. In the context of commuting, minimize commuting, right? Xij or Dij here is the distance between zone I and zone J. Is the matrix element here. Wi is the total number of workers in each zone. That's the demand. Jj is the total number of jobs available in each zone. That's the supply capacity, right? So this linear programming approach will find the best Xij so that the total transportation cost, commuting time, and its total number of commuters, average commuting time or distance is minimized. Right, this is pretty classic optimization problem. All right. So this is how we define excess commuting. All right. So since then, many research studies has been carried out to kind of further develop other metrics to enrich this excess commuting literature. So now it becomes a methodological framework. So we use it to evaluate the commuting efficiency of a city. Now it has, for example, maximum commute, right? So Dr. Mark Horner, the geography chair at FSU, he suggested, why not looking at the maximum commute, right? Because minimum commute is literally the lower bound of the city's commuting. The maximum commute then gives the upper bound, and altogether, that represents the commuting potential, the potential or the range, right? The range of a city's commute. And then comparing the range to the actual commuting, that gives us the potential utilized. If it's a larger value, that means, for example, 80, that means 80% of the commuting range or potential has been utilized, meaning a less efficient commuting system, all right? But then a few researchers suggested, well, the maximum commute sounds so unrealistic because on average, that means workers need to relocate to the most distant jobs, right? Or most distant housing to their jobs. So who want to do that? So they suggest maybe we should use random commute where distance does not play a role at all, right? So then some people use random commute as the upper bound of commuting in the city, and then come up with commuting economy, the metric, to kind of replace the commuting potential utilized. So it's a different perspective. But then a few people found, well, they are highly correlated. Never mind. There are many other, I would say, advancements in the field. I'm gonna skip that. For example, to get a better estimate of minimum commute, considering the household characteristics, and examining the MAUP effect on estimation. All right, so different efforts. I'm gonna skip that. And then let's identify the research problems. Right, so that's where the trip change comes into play. Because all existing research measuring excess commuting, all assume commuting trips are non-stop trips from home to job. Everybody don't stop at all, go straight from home to jobs or straight from jobs back to home, which is not realistic, right? So trip chaining is a very travel behavior, making intermediate stops on the way to or from work. So for example, how many of you stop on your way to or from work? All right, dropping off kid, right? What about you guys?
Groceries.
Groceries. Nice. Okay.
Every day.
And any other like snacks? The gym, yeah.
Oh, you're so helping. Spoken by the obese press table.
So According to the National Household Travel Survey, all right, by the US government, 54% of commuters made at least one stop, kind of regular basis on their way to or from work. 54%. And these are the common type of stop they make, a different direction from home to work. You serve passenger, that's time dropping off kids. Family, personal business, for example, you go to the pharmacy, right? Meal or coffee, you grab snacks. And on your way back from work to home, family, personal business, serve passenger and shopping. Shopping usually means grocery store, grocery shopping, right? So it's a pretty prevalent behavior. But all studies, right? I'm not making any exception, all studies just assume it's a non-stop problem. So it's a pretty, I would say like pretty simple idea to improve this, but it turned out to be a very daunting task. So the research goal of this paper is to develop now a model to integrate trip chaining behavior into the model to analyze the exception or the minimum, right? And also to examine to what extent the integration of trip chaining can affect the results, right? So study area. The study area is Tampa Bay. It's not a Tampa metropolitan statistical area. It's just the two counties, Hillsborough County, Pinellas County. The reason why I choose these two counties is because high self-containment labor market, right? Like about 90% of Hillsborough resident workers, they stayed locally to work. Only 5% work in Pinellas County, and vice versa. About 87% resident workers from Pinellas County stayed for work, and then about 1% commute to Hillsborough County.
You know that with the traffic on the bridges.
Yeah, that's a good point, because maybe you're talking about non-work related traffic. So it can be, for example, not the rush hour, maybe it's at night, or during the day. Any of you from Tampa? Okay.
I lived in Miami for 2 years.
A few landmarks I want to highlight. CBD, of course. This is, do you guys know this? Peninsula? Yes, the McDowell Air Force Base. Number three. Number three is International Plaza and the Boston Bay Street Shopping Mall. Right, that's the mall. And here's USF. Number 8 is St. Pete CBD. Number 9 is USF St. Pete campus. 12 is Clearwater, right, CBD, City Hall. All right, then, why is a daunting task? All right, first problem to be solved, where to get data. Because we need trip chaining, right? So the data available from census do not have that. They only have how many people commute from, let's say, census tract A to census tract B. That's it. We don't know where they stop, how many stops they make. So the data is from a synthetic traveler itinerary data aggregated at TAZ level. Using this data is populated by agent-based simulation applied to 3 different data sets, right? 2006, 2008 POMS data, 2006, 2010 CTPP data, 2009 National Household Travel Survey data. The CTPP data, like I said, only has the flow volume from A to B. POMS have information like travel time. National Household Travel Survey has the trip chain information. All right, how many stops you make? Where do you, what kind of stops? For what purposes? All right, so using the agent-based simulation, the data finally has the information of number of trips and what kind of stops at individual level, right? Individual level for each individual, simulated individual, where you live, where you go to work, where you stop, right? And it's at parcel level, okay? Geographic level is parcel level. Then we aggregate the parcel level data to traffic analysis zone. Maybe you don't know what traffic analysis zone is. I think geographically is it's a unit. This is a unit defined by transportation planning agencies, right? They don't usually use census products or census tracts. They don't use that because census tracts are kind of homogeneous in terms of socioeconomic attributes, composition of neighborhoods. TAZ kind of homogeneous in terms of land use. This commercial, industrial. This is residential, right? So the scale, the size is between tract and block groups. So it's smaller than a tract on average, and it's larger than a block group. But in Tampa, in the study area, the TAZ is very similar to census block groups because there are, I think, 587 census tracts and 1,500 TAZ and about 1,600 census block groups. We look at the data and we found 94% of the commuting trips are by car, by automobiles. So just for the sake of time and effort, we just assume all the commuting trips in the data are by cars, right? The boundaries of the TAZ and the road networks obtained from local planning organization, MPO. So this process, agent-based simulation to estimate travel demand, the trips are very commonly used by planning planners, transportation planners, to do short-term, long-term planning decision making. And this data has already been validated. All right, if you remember the process, the linear programming problem, a very important input is Dij, right? That's the commuting distance or commuting time between two zones. How to do that? The data does not have that. If you are familiar with the GIS, no matter what program you use, ArcGIS, QGIS, if you know programming, you can use the Google Maps API, which can give you congested travel time. It doesn't work. Why? It will always give you the travel time or distance between two centroids, right? Meaning every people live in the center of the zone. That's not realistic. So what we did in the paper is to have an actual component of travel time, which is the sum of the so-called interzonal distance or time and intrazonal, so the travel time within. Because it doesn't make sense for people who live here and commute here whose travel time is the same as this, right? So it's more accurate. All right, why is it daunting task? You can already tell a lot of efforts. And then this is the formulation of the model. It took me and my collaborator, the two co-authors here. I'm going to show the name later. It took us a few days, like 3 or 4 days, to come up with this model. As you can see, compared to the original linear programming problem, all right, like 2 lines, there are many constraints. It's pretty complicated when you want to consider only one thing, trip chain. Right? It's very complicated. But let me try to give you a general idea of how this works. So see that? So Dij is the same thing, travel distance or commuting time between two zones. And Xi now it's not Xij anymore, it's Xcijk. So C, it means the number of commuters of type C trip chain, right? Who live in zone I or starting in zone I with a trip purpose of K, and then go to zone J with a trip purpose K+1, and then keeps going, right? Another zone with trip purpose of K+2, right? Depending on how many stops you make on the chain. So what does C mean? The type of trip chain. For example, it can be home, daycare, work. It can be home, coffee shop, work. Right? That's only one stop. It can also be home, daycare, coffee shop, and work. Like 2 stops. Right? That's what C means. Different types of trip chain. K is the activity, the purpose of that particular trip within the chain. For example, home to daycare to work. The first leg, we have two legs, right? First leg to second leg. The first leg, the purpose would be daycare, drop off or export. The purpose for the second leg is work. That makes sense? All right. Number 9, this is demand constraint. Meaning you can see that this is one, always one. That means the activity is that means this first leg. We always look at the first leg because the first leg is people leaving their home, right? So this means the summation of the first leg flows for any trip chain type should not exceed or be identical to the number of commuters, right, of that particular trip chain type, right? That's a demand constraint. So 10 and 11 is supply constraint, meaning the total number of incoming, outgoing flows for the particular trip purpose or activity, like daycare drop-off or coffee or gym, should not exceed or should be bounded by the number of, let's say, daycare capacity or the number of job opportunities available at that zone. Right? You cannot exceed a number. I know this is kind of boring, right? So, number 12 here. Number 12 is called the flow conservation constraint, meaning at intermediate zone, like the zone where you drop off a kid or the zone where you buy a coffee, the number of flows entering that zone should equal the number of flows going out of the zone. Right? You cannot, because of intermediate stop, you cannot have a trip that ends there. That's not your destination. It's kind of flow conservation. All right, so that's it. That's how the model works. Give you guys a benchmark for the traditional linear programming problem to find the minimum commute for the study area, 5 seconds. For this, 5 hours. So here I showed you guys a diagram to help you better understand the process. This is the existing method without considering trip chaining. So for example, if one individual live here, they work here, another individual work here, live here, work here. So the first approach would say that, hey, you should consider find a house here, right? So that the minimum commute of the entire city, the commute of the entire city is minimized, right? Again, without changing anything, without adding new jobs, without adding new housing units. So our approach is to consider the stop they make in the middle, right? Of course, they can consider more than one stops. All right, so I'm gonna try to wrap this up in a few minutes. So here we only analyze home to work trip with no more than one intermediate stop, just for the sake of simplicity, all right? Also because the number of trips, number of commuting travel with more than 2 stops is very rare in the data set. I think it's about 2%. In fact, the reason why we consider only one is because I was just too lazy to pass it the data. The final study population is 4,700 workers. If we look at here, we have 7 one-stop trip chain types considered, right? This is non-stop travel, home to work, change mode, export. So change mode means people who, for example, they park and ride, right? Or they drive and then they use e-scooter, right? So they change their travel mode. Export, so dropping off kids every day, or you drop off your coworkers, your roommates, all right? You drop off seniors. It's a meal like coffee, ice cream, right? Personal business, like I said, pharmacies, hospitals, healthcare, schools, drop off kids to school, not daycare. Shop, grocery shopping, right? Social, like entertainment, and I think gym is also there as well. One thing you should pay attention to is that, according to the data, 85% of the commuting trips are direct, right? No stops. Only 15% with one stop. Like I said, 2% with more than 2 stops, 2 and more than 2. So this is not really a good representative sample of the national average. This will affect the result. A good thing about excess commuting, why it can be used as a policy, indicator, is because it's just one number, just like correlation coefficient. So that I'm not saying that policymakers don't like very complicated stuff, but only one number sometimes can be very powerful, right? So we did analysis for time and distance, but I did not show the distance because it's very consistent. So looking at this is the original method, traditional method. This is the method we proposed. So non-stop home to work trips, same, right? TOBS, this is the actual travel distance, commuting distance. They're the same because no stop being made. Looking at trips with one stop, right? So the time increased from 15 minutes to 23 minutes. That does not account for the time they stop. For example, the time you spend getting a coffee, the time you spend dropping off your kid, right? And if we do the average, it's from 15.6 to 16.9. It's pretty different result, right? Quite different. We'll look at the minimum commute. It increased from 5.4 to 5.6, right? You may say that, well, it's not a huge difference, but think about, the entire city. On average, every people can save, all right, now increase 0.2 minutes. Think about the number of commuters, right? Do the math. The excess commuting indicator, 65, 67%, not a huge difference. The reason is that TEX has only 2 components, Tmin, Tops, and they both increase in the same direction. So their impact to the TEX is cancels out, right? So one thing you should remember, only 15% of commuters in that area, they stop for they make only one stop, right? If we have 54%, that will change the result a lot. And then we look at the excess commuting along different trip types and find some interesting results. I'm going to skip that. And then, so conclusions. One thing I want to highlight is that the proposed method lays the foundation for extending this framework to the analysis of non-work travel. Because so far, excess commuting has only been applied to study commuting. It can be easily applied to study travel. So we can call it excess travel, right? But one thing that makes it hard is because in non-work travel, trip chaining is very, very prevalent. Okay, so but this work provides the solution. Application beyond excess commuting, for example, where a better way to examine healthcare accessibility and where to build new businesses, facilities, where to build a new hospital, where to build a new pharmacy by considering trip chaining. Limitations, consider other travel behavior, to consider work to home trip, right? Other factors, difference between housing and jobs. So this paper is published in Annals of AG. This is my collaborator, who is now a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, civil engineer. So it's research funded by CTEDD, Tier 1 University Transportation Center, who distributes money from USD. If you're interested in the discussion, look at the paper. It's more interesting. I think it's interesting read. Okay, so be thinking of ways to apply this framework. And I'm involved in a funded project with Faculty College of Education at UF, funded by Office of Early Learning. So we got data from them with the locations of their homes of each kid and the provider they went to and what grade they are at. All right, so then the focus is to look at commuting pattern, especially for low-income households, right? These are data from low-income families who receive subsidy. Because why is this interesting? Because for low-income families, they usually spend disproportionately higher transportation costs. So distance to them is quite important. So on average, how far do they involve their kids, right? And do they enroll their kids, and do they usually bypass the nearest provider? That's it. Sorry, only 4 minutes for Q&A, but yeah, that's it. Thank you.
I have a question. Hello?
Ladies first, sorry.
Not that I'm bitter about this talk at all, the aged sleepy deprived table. So I watched a really fascinating YouTube this week, YouTube TV on European cities, and how European cities are the exact opposite of American cities because they were built and constructed prior to the public automobile being a mode of transportation. And therefore, they were arguing that a lot of cities are flipped. When you live in the urban downtown like Paris, right, the most aspirational locations are often the downtown ones. And so I wonder how transferable some of these techniques would be if you look at those city structures where it's actually a problem to commute because it's not really feasible. And if you've thought about that at all in terms of transferability.
So I would say that technically, this is easily transferable. So as long as you give me a city plan, right, where people live, how many people live there, population density, employment density, so it can easily apply. But the thing is that sometimes considering different modes, for example, automobiles, or taking buses, taking light rails, or walking, biking, right? So that can be very complicated. Actually, this European cities, another example is, I'm not sure if you guys have heard that, it's a 15-minute design idea. So every city should be 15 minutes. I'm not saying 15 minutes by automobiles. So the goal of that city is 15 minutes by walking and biking, right? Because by design, you can literally reach anywhere, not saying every city, but a lot of cities, you can reach anywhere within 15 minutes by driving. But the biking and walking is not possible. So this, access commuting, the minimum commute can provide kind of, the deal. Sorry, I think.
I got a question.
Yeah, so your model's already very complicated, so I don't think there's this sort of thing, but I'm thinking about, this is like sort of assuming that these extra stops are sort of less important or wasteful relative to the sort of home to work commute. But I'm thinking about people's sort of activity spaces are defined by a lot of different kinds of nodes, especially with regard to something like childcare or school, where that actually is a necessary component of the way that people navigate their spaces.
Okay.
So maybe you know where I'm going with this. Yeah, so go ahead, please.
Yeah. So this is a good point, to make it more realistic, because now they're making assumption that people only care about commuting distance when they make decisions about where to live, where to get jobs, right? Only consider distance, right? But like you said, there are many other, for example, neighborhood amenities that they road, access to childcare, access to healthcare as well. Yeah, so there have been research going on. Like I said, I did not include a lot of new advancement in this field. For example, one worker household, two workers household, right? It's kind of hard to coordinate. And utility of the neighborhood. So sorry, amenity of the neighborhood. For example, does it have a pool? How many bedrooms? All right. So to make it even more complicated. So it's doable as long as you have the time and you have the the right people to work with.
Hello.
Yeah. So.
Okay, I just want to bounce off of that because I think one of the things that's been on my mind all the time is money and choice. People don't have unlimited choice about where they can live, and sometimes the optimal configuration is one that's out of the reach of most people, even those who pay. And that's a significant issue, I think, is just even if you want to design the ideal neighborhood, as they tried to do that in the UK, the neighborhood of Kings Hill, it was built in an old US Air Force base. And it was all fancy pants buildings, very much like American style design. And they were like, yeah, we're going to have people who work here and live here. Problem is that these are all really nice houses that were really expensive, and the only people that could live in London. Who's going to be able to afford one of those homes if they work at the grocery store. So it's just like, I
Right.
just don't know how.
Yeah, so first, that's why it's called theoretical minimum commuting. The second, but the most important thing is that second. So there have been research going on, including us. So Yuria and I, we've been kind of integrating another component to this is the type of neighborhood we come from. For example, we have like 9 different neighborhoods based on a lot of socioeconomic and demographic variables, including age, race, ethnicity, income, housing condition, and occupation, to make the repairing process more realistic. So that only, for example, only high income people, they can switch. Only, low income people, they can switch, right? So that's a step towards addressing this problem. Yeah. You guys don't want to use?
A very basic question. Do you know like what percentage of just traffic volume in the US is commuting? Like what percentage of like cars on the road is,
Okay.
is this?
25%. That's what I'm giving you. 25%, I'm saying on average. So the peak period, the peak load period, the rush hour is 25% commuting related. So but before it's like 50%, more than 50%. But right now, because the increasing percentage of non-work related travel, so commuting only accounts for 25% on average. Yeah.
Surprised it's that low.
Yeah, it's quite, astonishing, but based on data, like 25%.
Hello. I got a question.
Alright, I really think about it. I was thinking about it, one of my friends, his apartment complex is located directly next to his works. Like, and like, does anything about that be bad? Something like that, just to like work sanctions. So in your opinion, what do you think like that golden should be?
So this can vary depending on, I think everyone has their own, threshold. For me, for example, I don't want to live right close to my job. That's, the beauty of commuting. You still want to have at least some, length of commute so that you can have your personal, your alone time, right? So I would say, from 5 minutes, 10 minutes, like walking or biking, that's ideal. Yeah, if it's 2 minutes walk, I would say that's too short.
So just before we're done, and I go on my 55-minute commuting traffic, which sometimes of the day it is. Next Thursday is the Graduate Student Symposium, and we will be sending information out, but it will be approximately 2 to 2.5 hours next Thursday morning, which is a reading day, and while not required as part of Colloquium, it's required. Yeah. Oh, you should be there. Yes, and faculty too. So we'll be sending that out. So this is the last official Colloquium for the Colloquium series, but we do have the Graduate Symposium next Thursday. So I just wanted to remind everyone. And thank you, that was really.
I have a question. Hello. Hello, Yuji. I have a question. Are you there? Can you hear me? Hello. Hello.
Hear you. I can hear you, but I don't know who can hear you. Hi, Tim. Yeah. Hi, Yuji. Hello, Jay.
Hello.
Hello. I don't know.
Yeah, he said
No.
Hello.
I don't think they can hear us.
Yeah, apparently, I don't know, that's a bias.
Maybe it's through a chat. Maybe it's through on chat. Oh, okay.
They should.
Yeah, I can already. Yeah, hear you already.
Hello. Hello. Hello.